Have you noticed that mature Americans are portrayed in the media as useless, clueless, or helpless, or not represented at all? Have you experienced ageism at work or in public? Ageism is the last ism that is acceptable in our society, and we believe it's time for a change. There's a new way to think about aging, where growing older means staying involved and connected to people, communities, and the world at large. We call it With It. There are more than 50 million older adults in this country, and that number is expected to nearly double within the next 30 years. It's time for a pro-aging movement that acknowledges, embraces, and celebrates the aging process in all its dimensions. Share your story on our website, wearewithit.org, and follow us on your favorite social media channel. Join the movement. Get with it on aging.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this very special Eden Alternative live show. We are here today to talk about ageism, and we have some very special guests with us today. I want to thank the With It movement, which is part of Parker Health Group, for that amazing video to kick things off today. So with me today, we have Ashton Applewhite. And Ashton Applewhite is an internationally recognized expert on ageism. She's the author of This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism. If you haven't read that book, go get that book. It's amazing. Ashton speaks widely at venues that have included the TED main stage and the United Nations. She's a leading spokesperson for a movement to mobilize against discrimination on the basis of age. Ashton, we're thrilled to have you with us today.
Great to be here.
And we also have Donna Silbert. Donna is the Chief Strategy Officer for Parker Health Group. She is responsible for leading and implementing Parker's system-wide strategic growth plan and aligning the organization's strategic imperative planning, market analysis, resource planning, team structures, and business and capital planning. And on top of all that, Donna is the driving force behind the With It movement, which brings awareness to ageism and redefines aging by highlighting people who live their best lives possible at any and every age. And thank you to Parker and the With It movement for making this conversation possible today. So welcome, Donna. Welcome, Ashton. We're thrilled to have you here. So, and we want to encourage all of you who are out there watching, put some comments in the comment box. Let us know you're here. We also want to hear from you. We're going to be asking you some questions during this time and give you an opportunity to ask Donna and Ashton some questions you might have. This is an amazing opportunity to ask two incredible leaders all the things you've always wanted to know. So Donna, will you talk a little bit about the With It movement? That great video that we showed at the beginning of this broadcast. How did this all get started? How do people get involved with this movement?
Yeah, thanks, Jill. It's great to be here with you and Ashton, and hello to everyone out there. Parker Health Group is a organization, an aging services organization in central New Jersey. And a couple of years ago, we were doing some strategic rebranding. And our vision is to make aging part of life. And we all say, and those of us in the field say, of course it is part of life. But most people look at it as someone's end of life. And we didn't want it to look like that. And so we really took on this movement of #WithIt to really challenge ageism and really look at each and every one of us, regardless of our age, that the value we bring, the assets we bring to the world, and that we want to acknowledge, embrace, and really celebrate aging at every age. And because we're an aging services organization, there's a lot of people that look at us, oh, you just work with old people. And we're like, no, that's not the case. The people we serve are amazing people, and we really need to honor them and celebrate them and acknowledge everything they bring to the table. And so we started this movement about 1.5 years ago, and we're keep trying to get momentum, and with people like you, Jill and Ashton, supporting us, I think we can do that. And it's really was inspired by Parker, but it's not about just us, it's about all of us. And we need all of you to come with us, join the movement, hashtag wearewithit.org. You can share your stories. I think every one of us should look at ourselves and say, why am I with it? Or why is someone else with it? And what is it about them? And so we honor every day the people we serve and understanding why they're with it and the value they bring to each and every one of us.
Well, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for starting this movement, and we do encourage everyone to get involved with this. It's critical, which is what we are going to spend the next almost an hour talking about today. And it couldn't really be more timely with what is happening right now with the pandemic. And, I've heard a number of people say, oh, ageism has gotten so much worse during the pandemic. And I know, Ashton, you have a little bit of a different thought on that. Would you share that with everyone?
I'd be happy to. Partly, I just sort of get irked when aging comes up, and I think it's a little bit, Donna was referencing it indirectly, and instantly the tone turns into this sort of hand-wringing, sad, equation of, aging with all the bad stuff that happens at the end of life. Aging is living, living is aging. We are aging from the minute we're born. Dying is a discrete event that happens at the end of all this living. So every time someone starts out with the, hand-wringing, I get my back up a little bit. It is true that we have seen ageism be more prominent. And I like to point out that the initial messaging around the virus was, don't worry, only going to kill old people and sick people, which is not only untrue, but wrong, even if it were true, that would make it less. And we see now the cost of that, because if that had not been the initial messaging, we, the world, would have mobilized much faster. It's not making ageism worse. It's not making ableism, which is prejudice against people with disabilities, worse. It is exposing what has been there all along. And that awareness is why movements like the global movement to raise awareness of ageism and it has an incredible opportunity to build on that awareness.
Thank you. Right. So that, and I remember you saying that this is the moment in history, right, where we can really make a difference. Now is the time.
Black Lives Matter doing with systemic racism. There has been racism in America since, 1619. There's been slavery and there was racism before that. Suddenly, people on a massive scale are becoming aware of it. I see something similar happening around ageism and ableism. I think this is also revealing how those two prejudices are very much intertwined.
And maybe what we could do, because we just had a question pop up, it's that I think maybe we should talk about right now, if you both are okay with that. It's from Amy Gorley, and she says, I hope to hear some about ageism in the context of COVID and in the context of social justice, how generations are working together on social justice, etc. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that I think the movement that's most prominent in everyone's minds right now is Black Lives Matter. And I just spent a really long time writing a newsletter about this, trying to get it right. And the point there, I think, is that you cannot be anti-ageist without being anti-racist. You cannot support women's rights without supporting the rights of older people. The new activism is intersectional. Intersectionality is the idea, the fact, I think, that all these different forms of oppression intersect and reinforce each other. That an older Black woman experiences aging differently than I do because she is Black, right? That if she were queer, that there would be that level layered on. Each person's experience is unique, but as people who experience more layers of marginalization, that has to be dealt with too. So I think what we're getting at, Amy, is an understanding, of the saying, I didn't make this up, obviously, none of us are free until all of us are free. And that to be part of the pro-aging movement is to ally with and stand with and make these other struggles our own, and not to think of it as zero sum, because activism is intersectional too. And we chip away at the fear and ignorance that underlies fill in the ism, I hate to say, we chip away, we make it harder to be prejudiced, along the whole spectrum. So I think we're, I think it's happening, Amy, and that we're all, anyone who's thinking this way, just by thinking about it this way, you are becoming part of it in the broadest social justice sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And it also combats that like that zero sum, right? That you were talking about.
It's tempting, like, right, if I spend all my energy on, racism, I won't have any left for ageism. Well, obviously, everyone ages. So anything we do to combat age inequality, or I like to think to foster age equity across the lifespan, right? Ageism is any judgment on the basis of age, and younger people experience a lot of it too. That statistic about how in 30 years there's going to be umpteen billion old people. Well, those are our children, right? So we're helping to make a better world for them too, but it's the opposite of zero sum.
Thank you. Donna, did you want to add anything to that? You are.
Yeah. Yep. I think I would add, for those of us in aging services, we understand ageism. For most people, they don't even see ageism as ageism. Like it's really a knowledge, and so as you have all of these other social injustice, this is a chance that we can add ageism in a much broader and bigger way, so people can understand that is significant as well.
They don't understand what it is, Donna. They don't even, or they don't.
Or they're kind of naive to it. They're like, oh, like they kind of just like, oh yeah, just you're getting old, and you're old, you're useless. I'm like, that's ageism, guys. You know, the people. So I think that we're even having to make sure people outside of the where we live each and every day really understand it, and understand what a significance it could be to try to change this in the world.
And the first part of that, as you say, is looking inward at our own prejudice. My favorite response to my book is, holy crap, I had no idea how ageist I was, or that I was part of the problem. We're all part of the problem. I think ageist things all the time, just as I think we're all racist. We're all full of bias. And it's uncomfortable to acknowledge that, of course, but the cool thing is once you see it in yourself, it's like a door opening or a genie coming out of a bottle, and you can't get that genie back in. You start to see it in the world around you, right? And then I think that's what you probably see with the people you work with, Donna. They go, oh, I see it in advertising. I see it on billboards. It's not my problem. It's not my failing. It's a structural, social, economic problem that we can come together and do something about. But first you have to see it between your own ears.
Absolutely. And Sandy had a comment. The reason people don't understand ageism is because it's been accepted as okay by society. The old "I'm having a senior moment" has to be cut from our vocabulary.
Couldn't agree more. I say when I used to do all these things, and it finally dawned on me that when I lost the car keys in high school, I didn't call it a junior moment.
Right.
Kids. And I'm still ageist because my 6-year-old grandson went from the yard back to the house to get something, and he stood on the steps. This was just this week, and he got furious because he couldn't remember why he'd walked over there. And I was like, ha, 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 ha. Which was ageist of me.
Yes. Well, like you said, we all have it inside of us, and acknowledging it can be painful, but necessary to move forward. So question for you all. It's been heartbreaking, frustrating, kind of fascinating, but not in a good way, how aging services providers have been cast during this pandemic. Hospitals and those who work in hospitals are heroes and are acknowledged for their work, and rightfully so. But the majority, there are some positive stories, but the majority of any kind of coverage and any kind of narrative about our field of supporting and caring for older people, there's a lot of kind of demonization that happens. I don't know if you've noticed that. But what do you think? What is that about? And Donna, do you have some thoughts on that? So how many communities do you all have
We have 5 communities, all within a 20-mile radius of each other. We're in central New Jersey, and New Jersey has had some real challenges as it relates to the care for aging in nursing homes. It has not been pretty. The press has not been pretty. There have been some folks who have not done some great things, and it's impacted this whole field to the standpoint of what does this mean to move forward if you have a nursing home in the state of New Jersey. Very, very challenging. I think, our view has been that we knew our people were not getting recognized like those that are in the hospitals and the heroes. And so we had to do a lot ourselves to make sure our people understand their heroes. And I think I take a look at it and say, I think it's because people do not see nursing homes as a place where wonderful people live and grow and learn and teach every single day to all of us. And that it's just a place that people go and die. And that is the farthest thing from the truth, and is why we're so supportive of with it and challenging this. But I think it impacted our staff and the people who came in every day and worked tirelessly for months and months on end to take care of the people that they serve and take care of their families and go home at night and deal with everything they were dealing with. And it wasn't until recently that they started to get a little positive response from the market. And so we had to do a lot internally to make sure our people knew how much we appreciate them, we care what they're doing, and how they showed up every day made a difference in the lives of the people we serve. And the people we serve have helped us to get through this every single day. Yeah. And so we acknowledge that and we appreciate it. And we say, we're not going to worry about what other people say and do out there. We can only control what we do right now, particularly during this challenging time.
I can't even imagine how much harder the work is without the support of family members who come in every day. I mean, and your own anxiety about your own health and infecting the people you work with. I'm, because I'm in the culture change business, I always zoom out, and it's, I think, pretty obvious that the reason people don't value the people, that if we live in a society that doesn't value its older members, we don't value the people who work with them. Which is why we need the kind of culture change that I'm trying to provoke with my work and you're trying to provoke with the With It campaign. There's also, speaking of intersectionality, a layer of gender on top of that. Almost all this work is done by women. We don't value women's work as much. We don't value caregiving as much because it's women's work and women should do it for free anyway. And then there's race and class on top of that, because so many people, don't mean to speak about your facility, I don't know what your staff breakdown is, but looking nationally, so much caregiving, especially home care, is done by women of color, many of whom are illegal immigrants, right? So who have to work multiple jobs, and they don't have the structural support. So it starts with ageism, for a society that doesn't see this incredibly important work as valuable. And that is why we need culture change at the deepest, most grassroots level, like the women's movement. I mean, think where women would be without the global women's movement that changed profoundly the way we think about women's role in society. That's what we need around the place of women, of older people in society, as you say in your video.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you both so much for that. And Ashton, thanks for pointing out that intersectionality, right? It isn't. Yeah, it's not just about it. It really is.
It's really hard. It's hard to think about. It's hard to write about. When I was working on that damn newsletter, I whined to my partner, who is my very good editor, and I said, I can't put all the things in every bite of the sandwich, but you kind of have to try to.
Yeah, it's so big. It's so big, and
there is some everything in every bite, but you have to remember it. You can't. You can't just choose one thing. We can't operate in isolation.
Yeah, there are some interesting comments here. Well, Fern from Parker says the frontline and long-term care are heroes. Yes, and we work with one of the organizations that's we've been talking with every Friday. We get together and we talk with organizations from all over the world about what they're experiencing. And they said, you know, our team members weren't terribly comfortable with being called heroes, but they want to be called warriors.
Oh,
right.
that's
Right.
fierce.
Because, yeah, they love being called warriors, but warriors, heroes, whatever. It's critical. So the work is so important. And Mel pointed out, thank you, Mel, that the Eden Alternative that's what we've been working on, is that culture change that Ashton was talking about for, you know, the last over 25 years.
That's why I'm here.
Absolutely. We love having you here. So question, we wanted to ask the audience, and we'll give you a couple minutes to think about this and we'll keep talking, but we want to hear from you. What are the examples of ageism that you've experienced or you've seen during the pandemic? So feel free, put those comments, the examples you might have in the comment box, and we will respond to as many as we can. And while we're waiting, Ashton, I think you had a story of an interesting situation you had.
I was interviewed by a journalist who happened to be from Boston. And let me jump back a minute and a little bit and explain what internalized bias is. When it comes to aging, we are bombarded by negative messages about how awful it is going to be to get older, how horrible it might be to encounter any form of disability, all those messages about how we age out of being useful and competent. And unless we stop to challenge those messages, they become part of our identity. I think that's the process you're talking about, Donna, to challenge people. Wait, why are you blaming everything on being older? Maybe it's because you didn't get a good night's sleep, right? Or you banged your foot or whatever it is. Or, you know, there's no basis for this at all. You just need to stop and examine it. So that is internalized ageism. With women, the women aren't good at math. If you give women that message, young women that message before they take a math test, they do less well than if they don't hear that message, because we've internalized this idea that we're not, you know, good at math. So this journalist interviewed me. This was early on, and she was within a few years of my age. I'm 68, and then the lockdown had started, and she planned to check in on a young couple in her neighborhood that had a newborn to see how they were doing. And she was totally put out when they checked in on her first, because it didn't occur to her, right, that she would be perceived by them as vulnerable. And there was a lot of that in the early days of the pandemic, of older people being furious at young people partying on the beach, and younger people being furious at older people for going out and golfing or shopping or whatever, which is another trap, because some old people are careless, some younger people are careless.
Yes.
It's always wrong to generalize by age. The question is, what is an individual doing? But this presumption that, gee, I am actually, because I'm over 65, de facto in a more vulnerable category. That's not bias. That's biology. It has a lot more to do with you might be a healthy 65-year-old. You might be a 40-year-old with all sorts of conditions that make you more vulnerable than that 65-year-old. But when we pretend, oh, that's not me, that's internalized ageism, and actually puts us at higher risk.
And it's that us versus them kind of mentality that's so prevalent with it, right? And I was talking to some people recently, they may have been my parents, who are 80 and are extremely healthy. But
they're still 80.
And my mom said, and I love this, right? Because they take such good care of themselves, and they said, well, we're not worried about ourselves. If we got this, we'd be fine, but we're doing it for our neighbors. And I thought, well, that is awesome and amazing, but there is something there of trying to separate yourself.
It's whatever works.
Really, right? They want to help their neighbors. It was just really
my daughter-in-law lives behind us, and we're in a pod, and she is immunocompromised. She's had surgery. It's much easier for me to say, oh, I'm being careful to protect her.
Yes.
Than it is that I'm doing it for myself. But that's my own ageism.
Nobody wants to accept any vulnerability. It's hard, right?
It's hard.
So here are some examples that people had of what they're seeing. So Sandy said, remarks like, the people in nursing homes are going to die anyway, so what's the big deal? They'll just die sooner. And the fact that vaccines are not being tested on older people, so how will they be distributed to them without knowing the result? It's interesting.
Well, I mean, the elimination of older people from drug trials is a huge problem. It's more complicated because we tend to have more comorbidities, health conditions, and we are also might be taking medication. So it's harder, but it's not impossible. I don't think that's true of all vaccines. I think it's really important for us to put the pressure on drug companies to make sure that they do include the populations who need the vaccine the most to be included in drug trials.
Absolutely. Donna, you want to add in any thoughts on that?
I think one of the interesting things during the pandemic is, as it started, for weeks and weeks and weeks, all we talked about is all the people in the hospitals and how many people were sick and how many were in intensive care. And then all of a sudden, some light went on somewhere and said, oh, we best think about nursing homes and people in nursing homes. And we were like almost like second-class citizens that we were looked at in like after the hospitals were looked at. And so as rules and regulations were coming, and I'm sure every state was going through it, they were changing and they were adjusting and they were morphing, because it was like people didn't know what to do with these nursing homes. And no matter, you could be the best nursing home in the world, you're going to have to deal with this and adjust. But it really took a while for them to get that, people, older adults could be impacted by this in a big way. And you wonder why. I don't know why, but you wonder why it took so long.
Because of ageism, just like we didn't learn for quite a while that the impact on Black and Latinx populations was greater, because we live in a culture that prioritizes white people and the young people. That's it. Fascinating statistic around nursing homes with predominantly populations of people of color had higher mortality rates, regardless of where they were located or how the place was rated. If you want an example of just how just not being white affects health outcomes.
Wow. It's big. It is big.
It's big sandwich. Mucho big bite every time.
Yes, absolutely. So there's a comment, an example. Well, Sarah says on the positive side, the supermarket opens at 7 a.m. for older people during the pandemic. Yay. And I know there are some people that are like, I didn't ask for that and I don't need that. I know a few people that have been like, felt like that was kind of, but I don't know how you all feel about that.
I don't want to get up at 6:30 to go grocery shopping. It's my problem. I'd be really happy to have it to myself.
And that's what Abby says. Maybe so, but who wants to get up so early to go shopping?
I'm with
and
you.
At Costco, the lineups were longer. So Denise had an example. The owners of the RV park where my mom lives independently decided what would stay open and what would be closed, and how the people that live there should interact. They did this without including the people that live there. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a basic tenet. I've gotten more educated about disability and ableism, and people with disabilities are always saying, and it's the same goes for women. If you want it to work for people with disabilities, ask people with disabilities to be involved in the design. A lot of things, if you're going to have a noisy party, invite your neighbor, let them know it, make people part of the process. And then you get a better outcome, and it's different psychologically because you empower people.
Totally different psychologically. Very different situation. Even if you come up with the same outcome and the same decision, and
you get a better outcome. I mean, I keep learning bigger and better definitions of inclusivity, and it's like not just inviting someone to the dance, but having them design the dance, and maybe staying home and letting them be in charge of the whole damn thing, to start with. It's hard to step back. It's hard to relinquish power and voice, but it's necessary.
I like that. What you just said about it's not just inviting people to the dance. Donna, do you have any examples of some of the ways that you are including the folks that live at Parker with decision making?
Yeah, I mean, we live by the Eden philosophy, and we have our own culture. We call it the Parker way, and it's based on Eden and some other things we've added in. And it's really around that it's a person-centered environment, and it's really the elders who should be making decisions about how they want to live and what they want to live every day. And those of us in the corporate offices haven't been in one of our nursing homes for 4 months, but we see pictures and we get films, and it's like they're having a big party over there in a lot of ways, because they're finding ways to make life wonderful for them during this challenging time when their families can't come. There's no visitors. They're seeing only the employees, but what they're doing is they're being a part of what they want to do every day, and how the staff and they are like family, because they are so tightly connected, always, but in this pandemic more than ever. And we really look at the elders as making the choice about what they want to do each and every day, and we learn from them every day. And that's why this whole thing around ageism blows my mind sometimes, because there's so much we can learn from everyone, no matter their age, and honoring them and honoring the lives they've lived, and can help us and do so much to make a difference. And in one of our homes, the nursing home, they have a bunch of people that have created a Living with a Purpose club. And they do fundraising, they do all kinds of things pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, to make a difference for people outside of the nursing home, children and programs, and they do amazing things, and it gives them so much joy, and they have so much to offer each of us every single day, and we cannot forget that.
Yeah, the whole discourse around purpose is so interesting, because a life with purpose has meaning. And it's something we all aspire to, I think, lifelong. And especially there's evidence, especially in later life, partly perhaps because we're not so busy raising children or working full time, and we have more time to think about what that purpose might be, especially as less time remains to us. I think it's important to remember that purpose can be very small. It doesn't have to be to climb Mount Everest or change the world. It can be to see a grandchild, graduate from school. It can be to help a local political campaign of some sort, and that's another way of easing into the idea that you don't have to be physically perfect, physically active. You don't have to be setting some kind of extraordinary example to have purpose and to set a remarkable example. There are things about aging that we can't celebrate, because it's hard to celebrate the loss of physical function, which is inevitable, and cognitive function, which is not inevitable, but which to some degree awaits all of us, in that you can't remember, most of us, the name of the movie you saw with what's her name. But the point is that our fears are so much out of perspective, right? And I think it's incredibly important that when we think about aging and the voices we listen to and the examples that we appreciate, that we not just look to the extraordinary people who are performing exceptionally out in the world, but also the people who, in very modest, small-scale ways, bring joy to the people just immediately around them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Ashton. And sometimes you do see the highlighting of the super senior who's running a marathon, and what's successful versus not successful aging, and it's actually perpetuates a lot of
that there's like, I like to say, if you wake up in the morning, you are aging successfully. Those people are remarkable. They're they do set a great example, but they also, in a way, by almost appearing to not age, by continuing to be in the world, perhaps professionally, perhaps physically, perhaps socially, the way they did when they were young, they almost set an example of not aging. Right. And that takes remarkable luck, and it usually takes money. And for people
which goes back to
class, right. So if you don't have the money, or you could afford to hire an airplane but don't want to jump out of it, or you couldn't get up in the airplane to begin with, no shame, no shade, no stigma. You're just doing it differently. There's no one way to do it.
Right. And if you don't have access to healthy food, and everything just ties in together. But
that's what makes it so interesting.
It does. It's fascinating. So Sister Imelda has a comment, as Ashton speaks about internalized ageism, I'm reminded of the doll study in which Black children always chose the white doll over the black doll when asked which is pretty, which is good, which doll would you like to have? Who would not weep over seeing this? And yet we do the same damage to ourselves when we do not recognize internalized ageism.
Yep. When we look at, the person who appears to, to not age and think, why don't I look like that? Which is really hard not to do when we're barraged by, in every magazine and every TV show, there's not a wrinkle in sight. But if we don't learn to accept it, and I think we have a fantastic example there with the body acceptance movement, the fat acceptance movement, people going, honey, love me the way I am. And they are the people, who are the less burdened by this toxic message that there's one way to be. And if you deviate from it, you're a failure.
Right. Absolutely. And Denise was congratulating everybody at Parker for making sure everybody's part of decision making. I know you all take it for granted at Parker, Donna, but that is not the norm, unfortunately.
I'm sure it's not easy.
We'll get there, but want to recognize the amazing work that all of you are doing. Evie said, purpose has definitely been redefined during the pandemic. Filling my bird feeder and watching the birds has taken over from teaching the Eden alternative.
It's a great example.
It is a great example.
Yeah, I know. And this is off topic, but I see something really beautiful in the little acts of care. I'm obviously not socializing much, but even when I go for a socially distanced walk, the care we are taking with each other. Usually we care for each other, but it's not manifest, it's not visible, right? And here with our masks and our distancing and our concern for each other, it's tangible isn't the right word, but visible, perceptible in a way that it never was. And I find that a very sustaining, beautiful idea.
Yes. Michelle Daniel from Methodist Senior Services in Mississippi said the other day that masks are love for someone else.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Right. And it is. I mean, it's, yeah, you
and I might see it, when I'm with younger friends. I think it's my own internalized ageism that makes me wonder if they're being extra careful because they perceive me at higher risk. But then who cares?
Right.
Who cares? It doesn't matter. I don't think it matters to them. It shouldn't matter to me.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to, and thank you everybody who's out there jumping in with your thoughts and your comments. So it makes the conversation even so much richer.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is the very prevalent common narrative of older people right now in every headline just about is frail, vulnerable, people that have to be taken care of and protected. Now, Ashton, I know you have some really interesting and important thoughts on the intersection of ageism and ableism, and I'm curious to see how you might connect that with what's going on with messaging.
Yeah, and where my thoughts went, which I'd love you to speak to, Donna, after, is the whole idea of protecting and keeping residents safe, right? That the whole idea of for your own good. Needless to say, this discourse is incredibly complicated. Where I go to is, every so often there's something like, we'll just lock up everyone over 65. It won't be a high price, right? It's no big deal. We'll just lock them up. It's us versus them, right? As though that's not your neighbors, your parents, etc. We all want some input into our own situation. The age is the single biggest risk factor for COVID, and it's really important to acknowledge that and not be in denial about it. That said, I think they should, the authorities, the public health people or whatever, the municipal authorities, should make sure that the older people on their committees are down with this. I mean, men are more at risk for COVID too, and I don't hear anyone saying men should stay home. Right. So, who is making the rules, and are older people being consulted? It's really easy to go to this place where you can't tell me what to do. And so why should I have to wear a mask? Well, we ideally should behave with the health of the community. You know, it's about interdependence. I mean, I would like the whole notion of dependence to go out of the whole, you know, aging services discourse. We are all interdependent from beginning on, and people with disabilities, we have so much to learn from them about how they have lived interdependent lives in amazing communities. Many of them, their whole lives, reject the idea of being dependent on a caregiver, on a parent when they're young, and are creating their own version of autonomy, which requires collaborators and which is free of stigma, right? So the question is, how do we take the shame out of it? And that starts between our ears by not seeing that asking for help and needing help is shameful. And of course, acknowledging that it's not a one-way give and take. I heard a fantastic disabled artist talk. She said she takes comfort in the idea that caregiver and caretaker are used interchangeably, because she wants to hack that whole idea of you are giving and taking at the same time, no matter where at the table you're sitting and what's being exchanged. So I think that's a very beautiful idea.
That is, and we use the term care partners, right? Because it's
egalitarian.
Both people giving. It's very, very balanced. And Ashton, as you were just talking, I was thinking about just the fact that when you think about that intersection of ageism and ableism and disability, how much people they don't want to move into a community because it's acknowledging I need help, and it's shameful, right?
It's the stigma, right? But I mean, if we took the fear of loss of function, which is human, out of ageism, what would we be left with, right? If we can learn from disability communities, and there are some powerful activists there, right? What we would I feel like ageism would shrink. It would become, we'd be left really with the social part of it, which is manufactured, and which is, you know, we can't change the fact that our bodies change over time, but we can change being discriminated against on the basis of it.
Yes. Wow. Donna, any thoughts on that? Ageism, ableism, the intersection?
I think a couple of things interesting. You're talking about people, how they see other people. And one of the things in our assisted living, which is much more like, it's assisted living, but it's more like independent living. And you hear all the time residents saying about other residents, well, they're getting old and I don't want to use that walker and I'm not there. And so even within our own little microcosm, you have ageist comments that are going on, and people look and say, oh, I don't want to get there, right? So I think it's a challenge for every one of us every day, and we've all made comments that after we say them, we're like, wow, I shouldn't have said that, right? I shouldn't have done that. Ashton, you had commented about, you know, in as a provider, as we saw as it relates to COVID and how people, you know, deem, you know, older people with chronic illnesses were impacted tremendously by this disease, this pandemic. Real. And if you look at, I've only been in this field for about 7 years, but I'm told 20 years ago when someone moved into a nursing home, they look very different than the people who move into nursing homes and assisted living today. They're usually a little older, they're frail, they have chronic illnesses. And so while we didn't like having to do some of the things we had to do during the pandemic, we had to keep people safe. And I know it's up to everyone to be like, well, I'm my own person. But when you have people all living together, whether they're in private suites or not, you know, you had to do everything you could. And sometimes it wasn't up to them, right? And so it was a lot of work being done to make sure that they were comfortable and cared for and understood it. And we have videos of residents, you know, making comments to people saying, stay home, wear your mask, you know, do all these things. Because we want to get back to whatever normal looks like. So we're very blessed that our residents have been so understanding, and their families, in a very difficult time when, you know, people looked at just old people in nursing home dying, and that's not the way we need it to be.
But clearly they have been understanding because you have been listening to them and engaging them. When I have heard stories about people not wanting wheelchairs to be visible in their assisted living facilities, or not wanting walkers. And an example of the stigma of ableism is older people, not necessarily in residential care, but not in residential care, not wanting to use wheelchairs or walkers.
Yes.
Even if it means never leaving home. I heard a firsthand story about a guy who used to make the rounds of restaurants on the Upper West Side, and he had toys and he played with the kids, and he had some kind of health problem, had to start using a wheelchair, and never went out because he was so ashamed, which is terrible. And I think one of the things it's important for all of us to do, especially people in your industry, if you're listening, is show people using walkers, show people using wheelchairs, destigmatize it, right? Because then if you see, well, this is so-and-so is in a wheelchair and she's, at last I saw, kicking everyone's butt at bridge, or out doing this thing. It's not the end of life. It's not the end of her social life. Otherwise, we just sort of hide it away, and it becomes a continued source of stigma and apprehension.
Absolutely. And the same
I can't wait for AARP to start putting, I can't wait because I better wait, people with disabilities, making them visible in their literature. It's really important.
That would be very powerful. Individuals living with dementia have that same stigma,
idea.
right?
Absolutely.
And then we hide people away who are living with dementia, and then the stigma, it's just this cycle of, yeah.
And it is scary. It is scary. That's human, but we need to look at it, because once we look at it, it becomes a lot less scary.
Well, it does, right? And when people, like what I found at my communities is when people had the education they needed to support their neighbors and friends living with dementia, it changed everything, and it wasn't so scary anymore. And it created, a place where everybody was honored.
Right, and it doesn't mean you think, oh, if I get dementia, it's no big deal. I'm dying to get dementia. But it does, I think, mean, even if it's a little subconscious, if I get dementia, it's not the end of the world. It's not some binary where life loses its meaning.
Yes.
And it becomes more knowable and less frightening.
And I won't lose all my friends and my role in the community. And Donna, did you want to jump in on something like that?
Yeah, one other thing that I would add, I think as we look at this With It movement, it's about also kids and teenagers and young adults, and we're lucky that we have some intergenerational programming here, and it's just as good as for the kids as it is for the elders that they're painting with and drawing with and doing whatever, because it shows them that it's okay to be in a wheelchair. It's okay if someone can't hear well at that very early age. And I think we can start impacting younger people, whether it's in grammar schools or high schools, and try to influence them and try to understand that, being in the aging services world is not a terrible thing. It's a wonderful thing, and how much good you can do. I think that's where we also have to start with the younger audience.
Very important. Very important for the olders and the youngers. A huge percentage of people who go into aging services either lived with grandparents or were raised, including Robert Butler, who coined the term ageism, was raised by his grandparents. And when you have everyday contact with people of different generations, just as with people of different races, people who are different from you, it's obviously a lot harder to hold on to your stereotypes or fixed ideas about what those people are like.
Absolutely. There were some comments here that I wanted to go back to, because I want to see if you have thoughts on this. But Ashton, you had asked the question, what if we took away all of these beliefs about ageism? What would be left? If we
took the ableism out of ageism, what would we be left with?
What would be left? And Amy had an interesting comment, and she said we'd still be afraid of dying. And then somebody else commented, I think it was Fern, said most older people don't fear death like younger people. Thoughts on that? I mean, what does that play a role in ageism?
I have thought about this long and hard. It is indisputably true that older people are reminders of mortality, but we are aging lifelong. Dying is a discrete biological event that happens at the end of all that living. And I believe that the idea that, oh, aging, no discrimination is ever acceptable. One of the reasons people use to give ageism a pass is like, oh, it's because we're afraid of dying. Aging starts at birth. We start being afraid of aging, especially as women in our 20s and 30s. People who are 45 years old are not discriminated against at work because they're dying. They have 40 more years of life. So while there is, of course, a link between old age and dying, it does not excuse or explain discrimination on the basis of it, says me. I have thought about it a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. I can tell you thought about that a lot.
I mean, I should say I have written about this a lot. If you don't want to buy my book, on my blog, you send me a note and I'll send you a post where I explain it more. I've been thinking out loud on my blog, thischairrocks.com/blog. It's searchable by topic, and you can see what I've thought more articulately than my off the cuff comments.
And Ashton, you've got a couple other websites, right, that you direct people to?
Old
School?
Oh yeah, Old School. Old School is a clearinghouse of free vetted anti-ageism resources, oldschool.info. And you can find with it on there in our campaigns category. When I say a global movement to end ageism is underway, if you think I'm delusional, go to oldschool.info and click on campaigns, and you will see examples from all around the world of campaigns explicitly addressing ageism, not how to age healthily, how to live forever, what we can do collectively to end discrimination on the basis of age. My main website is thischairrocks.com. Another one is Yo, Is This Ageist?, which I created in frank, I admit it right up front, imitation of Yo, Is This Racist?, which was a site that's been up there for a long time that he created because we're anxious talking about race, we're uncomfortable. I started Yo, Is This Ageist? Because I think, as Donna referenced, a lot of people just aren't aware of what it is and what it looks like and what it smells like, what it sounds like. So it's a place where you can ask me, you can send a picture or a job ad or a stop sign or whatever, and I will try and explain in a witty yet ethical way why I think it is or is not ageist.
Perfect. Thank you. And we have another comment, another question I want to ask, but this is a great opportunity for Donna, again, to give your website address, if you would.
Yeah, so it's #wearewithit.org. And we're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So join the movement, share your stories. The more we can share about people who are amazing, the greater it will be for all of us, and we can work to end this ageism thing.
Yes,
Thank you.
And I'm at This Chair Rocks on Instagram and Twitter, and I have a This Chair Rocks Facebook page.
Great. So many resources. I really encourage people to go to all of these websites. And there are a couple interesting comments. So Dee says, I still hear people talking about aging as a disease. Just the other day, I heard it suggested that perhaps a medication or treatment could be created that would prevent our DNA from the faulty replication that happens with age. How can we combat this mentality? What partnerships do you see with the medical and research community?
Well, I can't say I see a whole lot of partnerships coming down the line because when aging is medicalized as a disease, people make money off curing it or fixing it, right? And if older people can contribute something of great economic value, illness, right? So capitalism, the aging industrial complex wants us to see aging as a disease so we can be persuaded that natural transitions are medically problematic, socially problematic, whether it's wrinkle cream or hormone replacements or whatever. And I'm not, each person should make their own decisions, no judgment about medical treatments, about cosmetic treatments. We each need to do this in our own way, no judgment, but aging is not a disease. Aging is through those DNA changes over time, there's more errors accrue, and it does make us more vulnerable. Your body doesn't work the way it used to, and that's just a fact. So I don't have much truck with the life extension, aging can be cured or fixed, because I don't think aging is a problem. I think it's this powerful, natural, unstoppable, even if we wanted to stop it, process that we each embark. So you use the term, Donna, in your video, pro-aging. I really like that. You know, if living is aging, then think what anti-aging products promise, right? If aging is a disease, living is a disease. Yeah, right? It's not a disease. And when we see it that way, we're falling into a trap that is built by medical and commercial interests that profit from our fear and ignorance.
Yes. Yes, there's not a lot of money in having people feel comfortable with who they are.
That's why they don't study drug interactions, which kill over 200,000 people in the US, most of them older, because if we've learned that taking all those drugs wasn't good for us, we'd buy fewer drugs, and that would mean less money for pharmaceutical companies.
Right, right.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. So we only have a couple minutes left, and there was, I think this comment kind of ties into this. You know, we wanted to talk a little bit about how overcoming that victim mentality that we have, right? Well, not the mentality, what society puts onto people, that you are old, you're a victim, you don't have anything to give back to the world. And then Andrew Stewart had an interesting comment. One thing I'm thinking about, and I think this ties in with it, one thing I'm thinking about is how a lot of younger people are struggling with collaborating with elders. With the rapid, significant social justice movements occurring, I observe some younger people disappointed with older generations, generally speaking, not embracing racial justice, etc. I know this is a bit of a generalization, but I see many younger people struggling with this, and I'm curious about more effective ways of truly bringing the generations together in a way that builds power.
I mean, depending on what your movement happens to be, I mean, the group that comes to my mind is Gray is Green, which is a bunch of older people who have been working for climate justice for decades. The Diverse Elders Coalition has been working against racial discrimination in aging services forever. I think it's a question of, you know, any generalization about a generation, and I'm sure you know this, Andrew, how could anything be true of a whole generation? And also the bigger problem with that way of thinking is then we get all bogged down on whether kids are more clueless or parents are more clueless. And that is what all prejudice does. It pits us against each other. So we're fighting about who's more bad instead of addressing the structural problem that we all need to deal with. You know, it is true that older voting blocs tend to be more conservative, but there are plenty of radical older people out there. In terms of Black Lives Matter comes to mind, you know, it is dangerous for us all to go outside, and it is dangerous for older people. I myself have gone out when I could because it makes me feel good, honestly, somewhat selfishly, but I ride my bike if it's not too far away. If it's really far away, I'll make it. And I stay at the back and I wear a mask, and if it gets too crowded, I go home. But there's an awful lot of people who cannot do that, or don't want to do that, or think it's not smart to do that. And maybe it's not smart for me to do it. Maybe I just want to do it because I've been doing it all my life and I don't want to admit I shouldn't do it anymore, right? It's always complicated, but you can find your people of any age in any movement, and social media makes it easy.
Absolutely. And I know Andrew, and I know that he's not saying that. He's saying
I don't get that impression.
But yeah, it is sort of like saying, oh, all those darn millennials, all they care about is
exactly, or all those old people voting for Trump. A bunch of them vote for Trump, a bunch of them don't. Find the ones you want to talk to.
I like it. Well, we have like a minute left. Donna, is there anything you wanted to make sure to share with the audience about maybe something about, you know, Parker residents, or really shifting that that thought that when we're older, we have nothing left to give back?
Yeah, I think as we're with elders every single day, we see how much they give back. I talked a little bit about the Living with a Purpose Club. And what we see is so many of our elders want to do. They want to volunteer. They want to be part of planning. They just don't want to sit back and be served, right? They want to serve. And I think what we're trying to do with #WithIt movement is to make awareness that people at any age have value and purpose in life, and we shouldn't dismiss them and write them off as they're at their end of their life. It's just a part of their life. And if we can all just make more people aware when they say and what they do. I see it personally with friends and families and things that come out of their mouth. I'm like, do you have any idea how that sounds? 10 years ago, I probably would have said the same thing. So it's really working to have people aware and know the value that everyone brings at any age. And we embrace it, and we embrace aging in the best form possible. And that's really our message with this movement. So
I love that phrase, at any age. In a weird paradox, age is almost irrelevant. It should be in almost everything.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Ashton, for taking time to be with us today. I guess that's one of the silver linings of this is you're not traveling and you're able to join us.
I have not missed airports. I
know you are usually on the road. And Donna, thank you. And big thank you to your organization, not only for sponsoring and being part of the show today, making this possible, but for creating the With It movement. So important. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. We were so thrilled to have so many great interactions via the comment box. And I hope you will join us next week. That is on July 20th. Penny Cook, President and CEO of Pioneer Network, will be joining me, and we are going to be talking about the future of aging services. Penny is brilliant and is always thinking ahead, and I know you'll enjoy that conversation very much.
Great.
Donna, Ashton, thank you so much for being here.